Hi, I'm Denise with Romantic Recollections. Welcome back to my series on getting started with machine embroidery. In the last video, I touched briefly on the topic of software, and I want to come back and explore that in more depth today. One of the questions I get quite frequently is, should I buy software when I buy my machine? The salesperson is offering it at a great discount, and it sounds like I need this or I can't make the projects that I have in mind. Quite understandably, you may feel some anxiety over whether you're making the right decision or not. They are offering you a discount, but the software is probably still somewhere around $1,000, and that's a lot of money on top of buying your machine. So how do you know if you really truly need it? So before we go any further, what is digitizing? Digitizing is the process that takes an image you want to stitch out, like a flower, and turns it into commands that your embroidery machine can follow. It includes all of the information about where to place every single stitch, how to move the needle, when to trim threads, when to stop so that you can change the color of the thread, and all of that. Digitizing is the process that allows you to translate that image into those commands, and the software is what helps you do that. And it's not just a simple file conversion software. This isn't like trying to open up an image file in a different format. It takes specialized commands and skills to say where those stitches are going to go and how they should look. Digitizing software that's intended for the home user may have a lot of shortcut features that you can use with a simple click of a button. For example, it may allow you to auto-digitize an image and it will generate the stitches for you. It may have a special mode that is specifically for freestanding lace so that you can easily design those pieces. However, whenever you have something that's a one-click operation, you're also giving up a lot of fine-tuning ability. You can think of this in the same way as like photo editing software. Now, if you want to upload a photo to Instagram, you can do some minor edits during that process, and they have a whole bunch of filters that you can apply with a single click. However, if you want to edit the same photo in Photoshop, you have far more options, but almost none of them are a simple click of the button. To apply that same filter, you're probably changing the brightness, the color saturation, the tint, maybe it's adding a lens flare, and you have 4 or 5 steps to create that same filter that is one click in Instagram. Anything you can do in Instagram, you can do in Photoshop. It just takes more steps and has a steeper learning curve. Professionals are using software that's more like Photoshop. It has a lot of commands and a lot of ability, but it also has a high price point and it takes a lot longer to learn. Now, what this means for you is that if you're using home embroidery software that has an auto-digitize function, you may not be getting the same results as the digitized designs that you buy on the internet. Those might be designed by somebody using much more professional software, and they may be a higher quality as a result. You can get great results out of that home embroidery software, but you'll get your best results if you learn how to use it manually rather than relying on those shortcuts. So you may be asking, is digitizing something I need to learn? Well, it is really exciting and it does open up a lot of possibilities. And quite a few people who start down the path of machine embroidery do end up wanting to learn how to digitize their own designs. But it's certainly not a skill that's for everyone. There are just as many people who prefer to buy their designs or have them commissioned. So don't feel like this is something that you have to do or you won't be getting the most out of your machine. My advice, especially if you're brand new to machine embroidery, would be to wait and see. You don't know yet what type of embroiderer you are. You don't know if you're going to love this hobby or if it's going to frustrate you to no end. You don't know if you're going to shove that machine in the back of your closet in 2 months and never touch it again. If you don't even know if you enjoy embroidery or not, or you don't know how much you're going to use the machine, you certainly don't know whether or not you need to learn how to digitize. When I first started doing machine embroidery, it was almost impossible to find good designs that looked right for historical projects, so it was much more appealing for me to be able to digitize my own designs. But that's really changed. Today there are a number of people turning out beautiful designs based on historical examples, so it's much more likely that today you can buy designs rather than having to digitize them yourself. So again, find out what you really want to do and what you enjoy doing before you drop the extra money on an embroidery program. Another reason for waiting is that embroidery software has a really steep learning curve. And if you're just now buying your embroidery machine, you also have a really steep learning curve ahead of you learning how to use your machine. If you're trying to learn 2 new things at once, you may get so frustrated or overwhelmed that you just stop doing anything at all. So I would recommend getting your feet under you with one skill before adding the second skill. Another great reason to wait to buy software is because just like any other software, digitizing programs get updated regularly and you may or may not be eligible for an upgrade. So true story, I bought digitizing software when I bought my first machine because I was 100% convinced that I wanted to learn how to digitize, and that was true. Unfortunately, I hadn't even used it yet when the program was updated a year and 2 days after I purchased it. And this wasn't just a little update, this was practically a complete overhaul of the entire program. Unfortunately, the upgrade was only free for people who had purchased within the last year. I missed it by 2 days, and I'll be honest, I cried. The older program really didn't have the features I wanted, and I barely used it. I edited a few designs, but I could never successfully digitize from scratch anything that I was happy with. And if I had just waited to purchase that software until I was actually ready to learn, I could have had a vastly improved program for the exact same amount of money. So if you're not sure that you're going to take it out of the box today, wait to buy that software until you are, because it will make a difference. Now, you may be thinking, but what about file formats? The dealer said that this software is the only software that will produce files that work with my machine, so I kind of have to buy their software, don't I? Generally speaking, no, you don't. You have other options. Most embroidery machines have an ideal file type, so since I use a Husqvarna Viking Diamond, the file type that I use most often is a VP3 format. However, Husqvarna has 2 other file formats. They have HUS and VIP, and both of those formats will also work with my machine with absolutely no problems. My machine will also open and stitch out PES files, which are a brother or a baby lock file, and it doesn't need any conversion in order to do that. It may not grab every single detail, like the specific shade of pink for a specific flower, but it will have all the pertinent information there, and I can stitch those files out. All these different embroidery formats are very similar to other types of files. So for example, only a Word document can produce a Word file, and it's going to work best on a Windows machine running Word. But chances are that if you send it to me, who's a Mac user, I can open that document with some program that's on my Mac. It may not have all the same formatting, but there's a really good chance that I can read the entire document, and it's a perfectly usable document for me, even if it doesn't look quite right on the screen. Now, on the other hand, there are file formats like plain text documents that can work on almost any machine because they don't have any of that fancy formatting. Commercial file types like DST are the plain text files of the machine embroidery world. I haven't yet met anybody whose machine couldn't open and stitch a DST file, even if it's not the format you're used to using. However, they may not keep certain information. For example, you may open it and see that the display shows blue flowers instead of pink and that the leaves are orange. It still has all the stitch information, and it still has you stop and change colors. It just doesn't display on the screen like you expected. It may also leave out other pertinent information. So for example, it may not format the trim commands in the way your machine expects, and so your machine just moves to the next point without trimming, and you'll have to come back through and manually trim the jump threads. Now this isn't as convenient as a perfectly formatted file that your machine truly recognizes, but it's certainly not a roadblock to using that file format. There are certain file types that are truly proprietary. For example, Bernina has a file type called ART, and these files can only be generated by the Bernina software. I can't do that in any other software, and I can't convert files into that format, so I simply don't offer them in my shop. However, there are other Bernina file formats that machine is likely to use and read, and if they can't use the other Bernina file formats, and if their machine can't import other formats like the Husqvarna Viking formats, it can probably still read a DST file. So don't feel pressured into buying the software that matches your machine unless you're confident that it's the best software for your needs and your budget. If you have any questions about what file types will actually work in your machine, there are plenty of websites, my own included, that have free downloads. You can download those free files and try them out in your machine and figure out exactly which formats do and don't work. And then all you need is a software that can produce those formats. These days, almost every manufacturer of embroidery machines also has a branded digitizing software that goes with it. However, it's also worth taking a look at third-party options. These programs often have the exact same features for a fraction of the price, and they can save files in a variety of formats, and most likely those formats will work with your machine. One of the third-party programs that I have used and liked is called Embird, and I like this because it is a modular program. Whereas a lot of the branded software just puts all the features it can think of into one package, and that's why the price is so high, Embird charges by the individual module. So if you're never going to stitch out monograms, you simply don't buy that module and you don't spend the money. Their entry-level program is just a few $100s, which makes it pretty affordable, and it has a lot of the user-friendly features that are helpful for beginners. So it's definitely one I would suggest you take a look at and see if it meets your needs. I personally use a program called Stitch Area Universal for all of my digitizing. Now, it's basically a professional level program, which means it has a really high learning curve, but it also has a lot of powerful tools. And I like that because I'm more in control of doing the designs. It's not as easy and user-friendly as programs that have simple one-click buttons, but it does have some automated features. The other thing I really like about this software is that it's very inexpensive. It runs on a subscription-based model, which I know not everybody likes. However, the subscription that I use is only $25 a year. It's going to take a really long time for me to get to even that same $300 or $400 that I invested into Embird, let alone the $1,000 of some of these other softwares. And even better, all of the upgrades are free. So I have found that this does a great job for me, and I'm very happy at that price point. Now, full disclosure, after a few years of using this software and really enjoying it, I did approach the company about becoming a distributor, and the software is available on my website. So when you do that $25 subscription, I get about $7 of it. It's not making me rich. But the reason I did this is because as a historical costumer, I was really committed to making designs that look more like hand embroidery, and I found that really difficult in a lot of embroidery programs that I tried. A lot of the default settings in embroidery programs assume that you want to embroider things on clothing or household goods, things that are going to get a lot of wear and may be washed frequently, and the stitching is quite different than that of hand embroidery that has a lot of long, loose threads that might get snagged if they're in the wash. Most of the information out there for the embroidery programs doesn't really give you guidance on how to make things more hand-stitched, and I was running into the problem that the distributor I worked with couldn't answer my questions. So as I have learned more about how to use this program specifically for historical styles of embroidery, I wanted to be able to support other people who are new to this craft. So my reason for becoming a distributor was to help people get into this hobby at a lower cost, and also to be able to support them once they did have the software and had questions about how to use it for historical costuming. I would recommend checking out Stitch Area Universal if you're pretty confident with software programs in general and don't mind a bit of a learning curve. If you just need a little bit of help, I do have an online class that is an introduction to digitizing with Stitch Area Universal, and I also offer one-on-one lessons. If you struggle with software in general, I would probably go with one of the more user-friendly options like Embird, or even one of the options that your dealership sells, especially if they offer classes on how to use it. Just like with the purchase of your machine, the best digitizing software isn't always about the lowest price or the most features. It's really about getting the tool that fits you best so that you are excited to work on projects and that it's easy for you to use. If you're struggling with the software, you're never going to use it and it's a wasted investment. So invest in the software that you feel like is the right choice for you. If you have more questions about digitizing software that I didn't answer, go ahead and pop them in the comments. I'm happy to answer if I can. If you'd like to check out Stitch Area Universal, I've put the link to both the free demo and my online class in the description below. I hope this video answered some of your questions about digitizing software, especially if you're new to machine embroidery in general. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to answer more of your questions in future videos. Bye!